First, allow me to thank anyone who is generous enough to give me the time of day. I'm not an important person. I'm a homebody, senior. I still love my life, but I'm elderly and I have Parkinson's. I'm in decline. I've written a small book of poetry that is my contribution to American society. But I've lived through the political climate since World War II through familiarity with my grandfather and my father, Midwesterners, and who worked in newspapers and educational institutions. Father was a veteran. And I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood during the Vietnam War and have a Jewish brother. And I studied Islamic mysticism at Temple University in my 20s and have an appreciation of the human condition in cultures other than our own. That is informed by my ability to apprehend the truth from academic readings. I don't have worldwide experience. I've never lived above the poverty line. I worked as a library clerk with librarians. I learned from working with professional librarians that each research question is attended by either the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat. You can try to find an answer to very stubborn questions through research. Experience should be retained, and the meaning of experience should be apprehended and understood. Questions should be identified, and ignorance should be referred to appropriate tutors and mentors. And I've seen some things that inform my understanding of the diplomatic fabric of the world around us and how casually it is disrupted by the mean spirit of high command administration. And as a civilian, I've never been comfortable with the idea that my opinions should fall in line with ideas that seem to be crooked, forced, false, or undeserving of recognition. I can think of 2 points of departure that are defining for me. One is when the press polls were formed for news reporters in the war in Iraq. I was devastated because I know the role that independent journalism played in testifying to the abnormality of what happened in Vietnam. Now I have studied the post-war world and the tension that existed in the United States under Joe McCarthy. I understand that there were always efforts to suppress and punish journalism that showed the wisdom of the human condition being extended to the victims outside the framework of nationalism. But the corralling of journalists into feeding pens of information was attended by a long blackout on what was going on in Iraq, which made the statistics that came around and eventually became recognizable meaningless, seemingly weather reports. Another was when the Berlin Wall came down. I remember the civil rights movement and the Kennedys and King. It was very deeply affected by Martin Luther King, not just because I don't like violence, but because I do like the appeal to the best in mankind. And his absence was never more keenly felt than when the Bush administration was jim-jammering to the effect that Russia was even more dangerous now that they had cooperated with the West with a magnanimous gesture. I was brokenhearted by that. And of course, I grasped at straws. When Vladimir Putin said the expression common ground, I thought, for pity's sake, Jesse, answer him. It was an appeal to grassroots civil rights movement in America. And it couldn't be mistaken for anything else. Russian sincerity is what Russian sincerity is. And Western hypocrisy is what Western hypocrisy is. It's terribly sad because it's so dangerous. But what gets me down these days, but also shows some civil spirit, is the wishy-washy way that gangs like Harvard, university politicians, leaders of academic sovereignty in our fabled institutions, the wishy-washy way that they are making deals with things that are offensive to academic freedom on its face. We must protect our diplomatic integrity in academic institutions by protecting our scholars and our guests. And the reason why is because if you look at what was considered to be a selling point for scorn about the Soviet Union, it was that Russian scholars have even admitted that some of the areas of their history have been disappeared, have gone blank. So many people suspect attempts to hide shameful things. Who knows? Things get lost. It might be that there were beautiful romantic stories that people wanted to keep private. But the most important thing to remember is that we've contributed to this disappearing history by refusing to give credit where credit is due. It's a simple truth that Russian culture and Russian studies could improve our understanding of the people of Russia, the leadership, and enhance our reputation as a people. Instead, we have talk show hosts We know more than our politicians about countries that never did anything wrong to us, who are under mysterious attack by belligerent forces who have bought a control tower in America, and I'm thinking of Israel, that is much like and was advertised by one of them as the incredible two-headed transplant, with its famous doggerel line of science fiction, "Now I've got to teach this moron how to walk." And you have that ugly little travesty of a story about James McRonald Crary and the Wattenmaker nerve implant for the purposes of mind control. Glory, Lord, today in God. We put up with this stuff from Israel. There are children starving who they refuse to feed over a maniacal uprising by people who they helped arm and make dangerous. It's in the books. There's no propaganda involved. It's on the books that Netanyahu preferred the leadership of Hamas because it made the people of Palestine easy prey. And we've jeopardized our sanity by going along with it. I think it was the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists who said that Iran has made Russia more comfortable being irrelevant. Well, they certainly didn't do this. The idea that there's a leapfrog oligarchy that includes Vladimir Putin is not lost on me. The idea that Netanyahu could make a swap with the Russians, you leave me alone about Gaza and we'll both be on the same side of the International Court of Justice fighting their warrants against war criminals together. That's out of my hands. I didn't write the warrants. I'm certainly not going to be the last word on those warrants. I did not want Putin to invade the Ukraine. I'm sorry that happened. But I also understand that the Ukraine was virtually invaded by Victoria Nuland in 2014. And that Clinton and Bush and all of those people who refused to speak nobly to Russia when credit was due played some pretty underhanded and shifty and cowardly pseudo-diplomatic warfare games of hiding secret war while playing a ludicrous, mean-spirited, underhanded, uninformed game of pin the tail on the donkey. So it may be that Putin can be defended. I don't see how Netanyahu can be. Netanyahu cold-bloodedly went in to a society of children and obliterated it in full view of the world's children. I would be deeply disappointed to hear that Putin and Lavrov went along with that. Deeply disappointed. But it's to be borne in mind that Russia liberated Auschwitz, not America. They're the ones who let the Jews go from the concentration camps of Adolf Hitler. And I consider it highly likely that when they said never again, they meant it for everybody. Highly likely. And those are the stakes. Those were the stakes when the Berlin Wall came down. Hitler's troops poured through Nazified Ukraine. There's a deep wound in that history, a deep, abiding wound of trauma, which is every bit as real as the Jewish experience in World War II, and every bit as deserving of restitution by emotional intelligence about it. And you can't say, if you agree with me, that American institutions have entirely failed. Because I was educated at a community college.